sisters, welcome to my TED Talk. Hear me, Lord of the silver bow, who set your power about Christi, and Killer the Sancresat, who are Lord in strength and over Tenitus Simintheus. If it ever pleased your heart that I built your temple, if it ever pleased you that I burned all the rich thigh pieces of bulls, of goats, then bring to pass this wish I pray for. Let your arrows make the Danaans pay for my tears shed. This is from Book 1 of the Iliad of Homer, which is what my book report is on. I read the translation by Richard Lattimore, who was born in 1906 and he died in 1984. He was a poet, translator, and longtime professor of Greek at Bryn Mawr College. And it was originally released in 1951, but it was recently re-released when Richard Martin added on an intro and notes. There are many different translations, but this one is the most well-known because Richmond Lattimore's style of writing, and he maintains very fluent and elegant verses, and people have, come to the conclusion that he most successfully maintained the original intent of what Homer was trying to portray to the audiences, which is why his version of the Iliad is the most distributed copy of the Iliad of Homer. So, now to Homer, which is the original author, or believed author. So there's discrepancy as to whether it is a collaboration. The Homer figure is in his works produced when he produced the two great epic poems of the Trojan War, the Iliad and the Odyssey. It's stuttering. It's cool, but Homer could have been a collaborative effort instead of rather just one poet. There's reasons to believe that it could be a collaborative effort because there are multiple dialects included within the Iliad, but there are stories that were found. They were called the Lives of Homer, and they attempted to explain his life, and they date back to the 2nd century AD. So, and they depict the Homer as an illegitimate son of a woman from Aeolus, which is a Greek-speaking region near the Asia Minor, and near the believed location of Troy. And he began in Ithaca, and he traveled to Ionia, and he sold his poems for food and lodging, and then he proceeded to go on to Athens, where and this is an attempt at explaining the mix of the dialectical mix of Homeric poetry, which includes Aeolic and Ionic. So the time period that this would have been originally produced by Homer ranges. It's a wide range. It can date back from a century to the Trojan War itself, 1000 BC, 850 BC, the 7th century BC. There are many different historians and poets who had tried to locate the exact time and place of the origin of this epic poem. But the most notable is 650 BC, which was brought up by the historian Theopompus, who lived in Chios, which is the believed birthplace of Homer. So this is why it has the most belief in it, or the most popularity, because in several poems, Homer is mentioned or referred to as the man of Chios or the man from Chios. So they believe that, it could be that. So, yes, it was originally an orally presented story. It wasn't originally inscripted anywhere, but it became inscripted in this time frame. Alright, so for the plot summary. So, we begin with a guy named Paris. This is the beginning of the Trojan War. This is Paris, this is Menelaus, and this is Helen. So, we all know the story of Helen and Troy. So, Paris decides to kidnap Helen, and Menelaus goes to his older brother Agamemnon, and he's like, bro, he stole my wife, and Agamemnon's like, okay, I'll start a war for you. So, now the Achaeans, which is Menelaus and Agamemnon, go to war with the Trojans, which is Paris. So, as they're laying siege to everywhere, they come across a town called Chryses. And, ironically, in this town called Chryses, there's a girl named Chryses. And Agamemnon decides to take Chryses as his prize, and his most prized warrior, or his most high warrior, great Y, his name is Achilles, and he decides to take a girl named Briseis. So, a father comes up after they lay siege to Chryses, and he begs Agamemnon to give his daughter back, and he, produces this great sum of money. He's like, please give me my daughter back, and Agamemnon's like, nah, she's mine. And so, then the man who I quoted earlier, he asks Apollo, who is his god. He's a priest for Apollo. He asks Apollo to rain down the wrath on these men who refuse to give him his daughter back, and Apollo obliges. And he ends up destroying, or he kills a lot of the Achaeans' army. And so the Agamemnon and Achilles and the war council, they bring together this meeting, and they consult the prophet. And they ask him why this is happening. They're like, it's because you didn't return the homegirl to her father. And so Agamemnon's like, I don't want to return her. And Achilles is like, bro, you got to. And so Agamemnon's like, sure, I'll do it, but I get your girl instead. So Achilles is like, okay. And so he returns Chryses to her father. And this guy, Agamemnon's like, okay, I'm going to take your girl. And Achilles is like, I'm not going to fight for you anymore. So Achilles out. Now, there's dueling, Achilles goes to his mother Thetis and he says, rain down, go to Zeus, talk to Zeus, your homeboy, and make sure he, gets revenge on my army, the people that I was fighting with, because now I'm mad at them. So, Zeus is like, I like meddling, and he goes to Agamemnon in a dream, and he also goes to the leader of the Trojans, and he tells both of them to go at them all force and, stop the truce and fight each other again. So they do, but this is a trick for Agamemnon and the Achaeans, and a battle ensues, and the Achaeans suffer great losses. Oh, right. So there's a duel between Paris, who began the war by abducting Helen, and Menelaus, who is Helen's husband, and he's like, you stole my homegirl. And so then there's also a battle between Hector, who is Paris's brother, and Ajax, a respected and tough warrior for the Achaeans. And the Trojans push the Achaeans back and force them to take refuge behind the ramparts that protect their ships. Now, this happens, and at this point, there's little hope for victory. They're like, wow, we're really done right now. But then, Achilles is feeling, he's kind of concerned for his comrades. He's like, wow, I wish this upon them, but, I didn't actually want it to happen. So, he still doesn't want, he's too prideful to actually join in the war, though. So, he tells his best friend, Patroclus, here, this is Achilles, and this is his friend, Patroclus. Here, you can take my armor and fight in the war for me. So Patroclus goes into the war, and he's like, rah, 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 and Apollo comes over, and he, makes his armor go boop, and Hector ends up slaying, I don't know if you can see that, slaying his friend, or Patroclus. So Patroclus is dead, and now Achilles is like, you killed the guy that was my best buddy. And Hector's like, yeah, I did, because we thought it was you, but whatevs. And so Achilles is so enraged and grief-stricken over his death, or the death of his best friend, that he rejoins in the war, but with fancy new armor that was forged by the god Hephaestus. So he goes back into the war, and the army of the Achaeans are, they're really happy. They're like, yes, Achilles, our favorite warrior, he's back to help us. So he goes, and the Trojans are like, well, we gotta take refuge because he looks really scary, and, Achilles is just destroying everybody he meets. So but Hector, he refuses to run away. So Achilles and Hector fight, and Athena tricks him into fighting him because he was running away, but he wasn't actually running away. He was just running around the city, and they were chasing each other. And so He tricks him into fighting, and Achilles slays Hector, and he dies. So, but he's still really, really mad. Oh, I dropped the thing. Achilles is still really mad over the death of his buddy. So he drags the corpse down around, on a chariot during the funeral celebrations for his friend Patroclus. And similar to how the story begins, it's ending with a father coming to beg for his child's body back. And Hector's father, the son of Priam, or the king of Priam, comes and he begs Achilles to give him his son back, and Achilles feels remorse, or not remorse, but he feels sympathy for him, and he decides to do it. So he gives Hector's body back to his father. Now, the main characters in this novel are Achilles, who is the warrior archetype. He's the main character of the story that quarrels with Agamemnon and defeats Hector. Now, the damsel in distress. These archetypes are Chryses, Briseis, and Helen. The magician is Zeus and Thetis, because they interfere with what's going on in the story, but they don't actually directly interfere, but they still change the fate of the novel. And the caregiver is Thetis, because she's always concerned about her little baby boy, and she's like, I'll do anything for you, son. And so she she helps him. So, alright, so themes that show up in the novel. One of the biggest themes in this book is the nature of human existence and mortality. Life is a struggle each person will ultimately lose. The question is how one acts with that knowledge. So that's actually in the intro, not the actual book, but it's really interesting. So the gods are immortal, but humans are not, and death shadows every action taken in this book, and humans are like supposedly at the center of the center of the universe, and everything in this novel portrays that too. The gods are the spectators, but they nudge the plot along. The attention to detail is also incredibly meticulous, which reinforces the theme that humans are at the center of the universe. The gods are watching them, but they are really invested in what happens. They don't actually directly interfere, but they're behind the scenes. And the death in this book, death is neither abhorred nor celebrated in this world. It simply exists. It simply happens. They don't fear death because it's a part of their daily lives. And like war is, they glorify military in battle, which is another one of the themes. Anyway, some of the motifs, burial, like Hector's burial shows the release of Achilles' anger and remorse over Patroclus and his close friend. Armor, Patroclus attempts to wear Achilles' armor, but it backfires, and then Achilles gets new armor from Hephaestus, and he ends up winning. Symbols are the Achaean ship. The Achaean ship symbolizes the Greek, or the future of the Greeks, because when during the war, the Trojans burned down one of the ships, and it freaked the Achaeans out, because they're like, if we can't get on those ships, then we're stuck here and we're all going to be slaughtered. But even if they were defeated and they got on the ships, they could still survive. Like, the people who they let live could survive. But it symbolized the Greek future. And also, similes is one of the main devices that Homer uses, or technically Richmond Lattimore uses. Similes are very, very big. Every Homeric poetry, or it includes three things. It includes saying what the thing they're comparing it about is, describing what you were comparing it to, and reminding the audience of what it is that you were talking about. So one of the quotes about similes is, they swarmed like bees that sally from sore hollow care, and fitting countless throng among the spring flowers, bundled in knots and clusters. Even so did the mighty multitude pour from ships intense to the assembly, and range themselves upon the wide-watered shore, while among them ran wildfowl rumor, messenger of joke, surging them to the ever therefore. And these are talking about when the ships arrived at the bank. And so similes are everywhere in the Iliad. Now, one of the reasons that this book would be really good to use on the AP test is because it's incredibly unique and there is symbolism everywhere in this novel. This video is already really, really long, and it could be longer because I could go on forever talking about the themes and the symbols in this book and how much you can read into them and try and see deeper meaning into them. But it could be really useful on the question 3 prompt because it really examines the nature of humanity and the mortality that we all face. And maybe not in battle, but the decisions that we make and the pride that we let affect us. Anyway, this is the end of it. Hopefully you didn't fall asleep. Bye!